What is up, Remodelites? I'm Dave with Remodel Media, and in this video we're going to get into a very popular question, which is...
Excuse me?
What can I do for you?
My plumber said to get a toilet, and he told me to get a Toto, but he didn't say which one, and I didn't realize there were so many.
You're right, there are a lot to choose from, and they all work a little differently, so it's important for you to know the difference. Let's get into it. So first things first, we need to get a little vocabulary out of the way, and we need to dissect the anatomy of what makes a toilet, because these terms will come into play in a little bit. The first term is fill valve. The fill valve is the thing that fills your toilet tank up with water after you flush. If you have an older toilet, you're going to have something that looks like this. It's got a big plastic ball floating on the end of it. Other terms, you got anti-siphon, fill valve, float valve. All these mean the same thing. It's the thing that fills the toilet up until the ball reaches the top, and then when the ball reaches the top, it shuts off. Most modern day toilets have a fill valve that looks more like this. Now, this is a direct replacement for that. You could pull that old one out, throw one of these in. They fail a little bit less, and they last a little bit longer. So I'm going to put a link in the description below if you want to pick one of these up. They're usually under 20 bucks. Probably closer to about 10 would be my round estimate. This is your typical everyday fill valve. The fill valve a Toto uses is of similar design. It's from Corky, a brand made by the company Lavelle. And they specialize in the quiet fill valve. Now the quiet fill valve, like the Fluidmaster, is adjustable in height, and it has a float that moves up and down, a lot like the float that the Fluidmaster uses. These are fill valves. We won't spend a lot of time talking about them, but it's important that you know what they are. Now, the next vocabulary here is flush valve. Now, this is where toilet technology starts to get a little bit different, especially with Toto. Your flush valve is something like this. It's got a little flapper. That's the flappy piece that opens up and down and flushes the water. However, Toto's looks a lot like this one. It's a lot bigger. It's a 3-inch flush valve versus I think this one's under 2 inches. Fits most typical toilets. This would fit something like your Toto Drake and other similar models, which we'll get into here in a second. So you have the flush valve, you have the fill valve, you have the trapway, you have the area underneath the toilet tank where the water flows as it exits the toilet. So there's your vocabulary lesson for the day. I hope you took notes, because they will come up later, I promise. To understand why Toto has the brand reputation that they do, you first need to understand the history. And to understand the history, we got to go back to the 80s. Now, in 1980-something, when a very young Remodelite was playing on his Knight Rider big wheel and pretending he was David Hasselhoff,
Rider power cycle with Kit on a pretend instrument panel.
Here he comes.
You can pretend Kit is talking, leading you to the enemy.
Stay behind the fence. Let's get he's gonna pass us. Yeah. Just spin up. Night Rider. The guy's cool. One more chance. Go ahead, Turbo. Night Rider. You got him. You're no match for Knight Rider, right, Kit?
There's also the Knight Rider 2000 pedal car with a real voice for Kit. Activate the turbo boost.
A lot of water companies and municipalities were putting greater water restrictions on toilet use. These water restrictions took our toilets from about a 3.5 gallon flush to a 1.6. I can still remember as a kid my mom taking her voucher from the water company down to the local hardware store, picking up her 1.6 gallon toilet, and having a handyman come out and install it, taking out the 3.5 gallon flush. And we ended up with a toilet we had to flush 3 times to make it work. The reason for that was because most companies were still using the same old flush valve, but it was now working on less water. And you had this toilet that was engineered to work on 3.5 gallons per flush, and it worked great. But you take it down to a 1.6 gallon per flush, all of a sudden it doesn't work at all. So along came Toto to save the day, because they had already perfected in Japan the use of a larger flush valve and a larger trap underneath. Now, that was called their standard power gravity flush for a very long time. A little later, they introduced G-Max and then E-Max, and they all basically work the same. The difference between G-Max and E-Max is E-Max is the current California compliant, and in a few other states too, 1.28 gallon per flush. That's right, in California, the maximum flush we can get is a 1.28. But we don't have to be too worried about it as long as we get a toilet that is designed to work on 1.28 gallons per flush. The power gravity flush, G-Max and E-Max, all have rim jets around the bowl that flush down, a siphon jet in the bottom, and that creates both a push and a pull. And they have a larger trap and a larger flush valve. All of this equates to a better performing toilet in 1980 something. Fast forward a few years, Toto establishes their branding. They become known as the best flushing toilet in a 1.6 gallon per flush world. You fast forward over the last few years, other companies have come close to replicating that or doing their own version of it. But Toto has had a 30, 40-year advantage on a lot of these other companies, so they're always a few steps ahead. So if you fast forward to about 7 years ago, Toto introduced a flushing system called the Tornado Flush. Now, the Tornado Flush, which originally started out as the Double Cyclone, but then they rebranded again to call it Tornado, takes that old rimjet design and gives it a little tweak. And now the jets go in a clockwise motion. And so the water that's passing across the surface of the bowl actually passes more times than something that washes straight down. So you have not just a powerful flush, but also a cleaner flush as well. You have more bowl cleanliness, less need to scrub, which is a really good thing. These days, the Tornado Flush on certain models of the toilets are actually available even in a 1.0 gallon per flush. It's not available in every model, and 1.0 gallon per flush, as far as I'm aware, is not necessarily code anywhere, but it's for folks who want to be extra green and get the extra points associated with being green. I know that in some cities, they will give certain rebates for putting in 1.0 gallon per flush, but we're not mandated to do that yet. However, I will say we put in some 1.0s in my parents' house, and they seem to be working just fine. They've had them now for almost a year. Now, around the same time, they also introduced a technology called Ultramax. Now, this was their classic dual flush design, and it incorporates a piston type flush valve with two functions, a big button for big jobs and a little button for little jobs. And it goes usually from 1.6 to 0.8 gallons per flush, depending on which kind of flush you do. One key element of the Ultramax flush that is super important to keep in mind is the original Ultramax design did not include a siphon jet. A siphon jet is that jet in the bottom of the bowl that creates the pull. So in the Tornado Flush, you have both a push and a pull. Ultramax is also what they call their in-wall system, where you have a wall carrier with two buttons and a wall-mounted toilet as well. Now, an interesting development is on certain toilets, only certain models, they actually have a Ultramax Tornado Flush, which means that you can actually have the extra power and a siphon jet associated with the Tornado Flush, but you have the water-saving ability of the Ultramax Flush. So to recap, you have the old G-Max or E-Max technology. That's kind of a phase-out model. I would stay away from that. However, The most popular model in that category is usually the one used for property managers, and that is the Toto Entrada. The Toto Entrada is their $200 model. And yeah, that's right. Toto actually does have a $200 toilet. It uses the old flush technology, but it works. And it's 1.28, uses the Emax technology. You have the Toto Tornado Flush, which in my parents' house, we put the Drake. Works great, simple 2-piece toilet, usually right around $400, plus or minus. And that one does a really good job. That one is probably the best bang for your buck if you're looking for the most current flush. It is water saving, but it's also the cleanest flush possible. You have the Dual Max, which, depending on who you talk to, some people like it, some people don't. I'll be honest, I still am preferential to the Tornado and the Dual Max Tornado. Now, there's not enough information out there on the Dual Max Tornado yet to give you an adequate opinion. I have not seen it installed in enough houses to let you know, but maybe in a little while, once it takes hold, we'll see how it holds up. One type of Toto toilet I did not really get into now because I feel like it deserves its own episode is the Toto NeoRest. Now, the Toto NeoRest is the toilet that has the bidet functionality. Some of the units, I believe, have like an audio streaming feature. You can actually stream music while you... And you can... And these, even though these are technically toilets, I believe that they are in their own category. So I haven't really covered them today. But I will, I promise. Remember to click like and subscribe and ring the bell and do all those things. If you feel compelled to do so, you can go ahead and click here for more content. You could go ahead and click here to subscribe to the channel. And my question for you is, what toilet do you have, or what toilet do you wish you had? Let me know in the comments below, and I will catch you in the next one.